Good evening. The news gang is here tonight. End of the party, or is it? The Jubilee conmen, brokers and spectators talk about Tuko Pamoja. Also on the show, the masks at KEMSA and the faces behind them. Plus the COVID-19 donations that disappeared before we could even say Jack Ma. On Yvonne's take, is it we the people or woe the people? On the memo, Jamila can't find chapter 6 in the Constitution. The punchline is about new wine in old wineskins. On the kicker, Kai is back with deep personal reflections. And the angle is on the crooked corruption catwalks in Kenya. Let's begin the show.
We received 21 packages less. So the 21 packages never arrived in Kenya. They never arrived at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. So that shortfall was in Ethiopia, not here.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, karibu sana. A special welcome back to Linus. Good to really have you back. We missed you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaga and Tim.
All right. Yeah, but now you come back to the same old stories. So we have donations from Jack Ma, and one moment there's talk they disappeared at the airport. Now we're actually being told that no one is sure where these things are. Talk of Ethiopia, that probably they didn't even get onto that flight that came from Addis.
I think, Joe, what is interesting is the fact that now this information is coming out now. This is September. I think the donations came, if I'm not mistaken, sometime in late March.
April.
This is almost six months later that we're hearing about this, and that it's being followed up now. That 21 of the containers or of the packages never arrived in the country. That's one. And all this came out during the sittings before the National Assembly Health Committee, probing what is going on at KEMSA in terms of procurement of goods. And the amounts that are being spoken about are in billions. In fact, yesterday, Health CS Mutahi Kagwe admits that there are goods or products or PPEs and masks and sanitizers worth over 6 billion shillings that are in KEMSA stores right now, which were bought at inflated prices. And we've said this before. And in fact, today, during the sitting before the National Assembly, we had members of KEMSA and senior managers speaking about this and trying to explain what happened with the procurement. And they were giving reasons like they did not use the open tender because of time and because there was an urgent need for the goods because of COVID-19. And they even quoted an act that said that you can use such procurement processes in instances where there is imminent threat to public health, and COVID-19 was such instance. And they tried to explain why they went the route they did, talking about even how the prices of goods, we keep talking about inflated prices. So the argument they were giving today was those were the prices back then in March and April. For instance, they were saying PPEs were going to for between 12,000 shillings and 15,000 shillings, and that they bought them at 9,000 shillings. They're talking about masks, which were going for between 5,000 and 7,000, and as KEMSA, they bought them at 4,500, and even sanitizers. So they're trying to say that they even did a market survey. But the market survey was inconclusive in terms of some of the items were not in stock. So there were all these reasons being given that there were no suppliers for some of these these goods at the time, so they had to buy them. So that, and I give a quote, they did not want to go the Italy route, where Italy was unable to procure some of these goods because hawakuzinunua in time. So they wanted to have them so that the country could have these goods. But now they are stuck in their warehouses, over 6 billion shillings. And also remember that the CEO, the suspended CEO, came under fire for bypassing the KEMSA board and the Ministry of Health and going directly to the Treasury and requesting over 5 billion shillings for buying these goods, forgetting that the Ministry of Health, conveniently forgetting the Ministry of Health, had said that the ceiling, that the amount they are supposed to spend is just about 750 million on these goods. So there's a lot of back and forth.
But what is, and Yvonne, you could come in here. So there are many issues here. One, there is the question of things that cannot be found at the airport. Then there is the issue of the price at which all these things were bought. And then there is also the question of how the tenders were awarded. So it's actually a mishmash of all manner of things, and all of them sounding very bad.
Indeed. And out of all those issues, what stood out for me is, the insistence that we've heard that no money was lost, but that they're still raising issues over procedure. Now, it's important to note that attempted robbery is still, a crime. Yeah. As much as robbery itself, a successful, even attempted murder. And for me, that is the issue, that if we're starting to raise issues over procedural issues gone wrong, that KEMSA is bypassing, allegedly, the Ministry of Health and going to the National Treasury, then there is a question there. About the tendering, I did an explainer on this with regards to just how this should be done. Restricted tendering is not a problem, considering we were at a time when there was COVID and things had to be done quickly. But this is what it says, that, if the time and cost that is required to examine and evaluate, does not permit, this was an urgent situation, granted. But it's also that it is a specialized nature of goods limited to pre-qualified contractors. Now, if you take a look at what was said today with the director or the owner of Shop and Buy, this was a company that was registered on the 4th of February 2020. About a little over a month before Kenya registered its first case. By then, anyway, COVID was a big deal around the world. And it was incorporated, according to the CR12 document, on the 2nd of April 2020. And you would have to have said that this is a company, this is another thing for restricted tendering, that there's only a few known suppliers of the goods or works. This is a company apparently registered just months before it. The owner, when put to task over this, you have to prove that they have the capacity, the capability, and the history of providing said goods. When he was asked today at the Senate, he said, that he actually deals in real estate, and he's been doing so for about 15 to 20 years. There were questions as to how this company has branches across the country, having been just registered in February 2020, and that this company that was formed just a month before COVID-19 hit the country was able to deliver or supply goods worth 970 million shillings, which is just 30 million shillings shy of 1 billion. And then he also went on to say that, he doesn't deal in medical equipment, but that there are other suppliers. So he was a broker. There are certain things here that, don't add up. And so the question was, why wouldn't KEMSA just go directly to those suppliers? Why was, Shop and Buy needed? So those are some of the things for me that stand out. And I don't think the idea that money was not lost, and that'll be determined by the EACC and the courts eventually, but that if there was an attempt at some illegal activity, then that in itself is also something that should be probed. So the no money being lost, I don't think is enough of
and Gashuri, very, very, very interesting that even as we talk about this, there is an admission even by the CS himself that at any rate, we are still going to lose money because of these things that are now stuck in warehouses, having been bought at these staggeringly high prices, so much so that no one can buy them right now, given how cheap some of those things have become. So actually, there is a possibility. The last time I checked, they were saying 2 billion shillings if they were to sell them at market rate, what is really prevailing at the moment.
You see, there are two issues that we must deal with here. Number one, on the donations by Jack Ma, and secondly, on the cost that we incurred as a country purchasing these COVID-19 items. There are some fundamental questions that we need to ask. First of all, if my memory serves me right, I heard the Ministry of Health say all the donations were received. No donations were lost. Today, the Ministry of Transport is telling us we received but 21 consignments did not make it here.
Whose contents we don't even know. They said.
So let's first answer let's get answers to the first question.
Yeah.
Every donation that was meant for Kenya, was it received? If it wasn't, where did it go? Because it either is in Ethiopia or somewhere on the way to Nairobi. Or it landed in Nairobi.
And Lord knows what happened.
Maybe disappeared in one way or another. Those are some fundamental questions that we need to get answers to. Number two, you heard the KEMSA chair say some of these donations are in our warehouses. Actually, we can even take you there to go and see them. Donations that were given in April, what were they for? They're supposed to be distributed.
What are they doing in warehouses?
To mitigate the effects of COVID-19. At the same time, we hear doctors and nurses talk about shortage of these items as frontline workers. So if we got donations for free and they're in warehouses, what are they doing there? Is it that we have enough in circulation such that what we have is in stores awaiting a reduction in the supply so that we can go to the warehouses and get it? So there's some interesting questions that we need to get answers to. And number three, how is it that we procured all these things at the same time in such huge bulk, and then we are talking about reducing the prices, and in the event, occasion a 2 billion shillings loss? And it's not any other person's 2 billion shillings. It is the taxpayers' money, 2 billion shillings, that we are told suppliers, actually most of them have already been paid. So even as we have this discussion, there's someone who is looking at us and laughing because they got their money and we are discussing money that they got. Very interesting times to be
Where I come from, they actually say it's discussing something that has been swallowed by the chicken.
Yes.
But Linus, this is all too familiar, that there's a crisis. People say, oh, we didn't have time, so we had to take shortcuts. And shortly, you actually hear these kinds of stories.
For the very reasons stated there by Francis, I really honestly think we should not chase rabbits. We should go to the conclusions. Because this conversation, whether around this news gang or inside Parliament, is heading nowhere. The questions we should be asking today, the audit that this country really needs today, is how many millionaires or how many billionaires has corruption created in the last 8 years? Because you look at all these things, the totality of it, this is our way of life right now. I remember when President Mwai Kibaki came to office on 30th December 2002, in his speech he said corruption will cease to be a way of life.
Hatutakuwa na huruma.
Hatutakuwa na huruma.
Atakayepora mali ya wananchi.
Yes. I think the pair that came in 2013 should have taken the reverse of the same oath and say, this will be our way of life. Tell me one single government deal, procurement deal that you can remember that has gone without a sense of scandal in it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this, and in 2014, when this administration was only a year old, it had already managed to wipe completely, overtake Anglo-Leasing, overtake Goldenberg, overtake Triton. What I'm watching now in terms of what is happening at KEMSA and Ministry of Health, this is simply Afia or Murphy House Part 2.
Yeah.
This is Season 2. You look at the Auditor General's report of 2015-2016. The media, and I remember the story was broken by Business Daily, and then we at NTV at the time followed, complete with an editorial that said system ya majambazi, which caused a lot of friction between us and the government. Because we called it out that, look, how can you not account for 5 billion shillings? If you read the Auditor General's reports, they honestly read like a police OB, a crime report. Because the Auditor General's report says beyond the 5 billion, there was another 6 billion shillings that could not be explained. In total, actually, the figure was put at 1.3 billion shillings that could not be accounted for in the Ministry of Health between 2013 and 2016. That is the Auditor General's report. Now, we are wasting time as a country. Nothing will happen around this issue. And I want us to play the President's directive so that I can just add on a few comments before, Joe, I come back to you.
Okay.
The Ministry of Health, within the next 30 days, must come up with a transparent, open method and mechanism through which all tenders and procurement done by KEMSA are available online so that we can see who has been awarded a tender, we can see what is the value of that tender.
Now, this is the president taking us through the therapy again. No answers, really. It is a physiotherapy for the country. That 21 days. First of all, I don't think it's legal that he gives directives to the investigative authorities. They're supposed to work independently and do their job. But I think this is an anesthetic, you know, to keep us going, to keep us believing that something is happening. This government never told the country what happened to 5 billion, what happened to eventually to 1.3 billion in Afi House. This government will not explain what is going on at KEMSA. We are wasting more oxygen talking about this than we are wasting oxygen fighting COVID-19.
Can I help you waste
But you
some...
see, when the president speaks like that, Francis, I'm reminded of quite a number of things.
Yes.
You know, the promises that have been made about procurement officers, the lifestyle audit, where he said, Itanza Namimi,
that
was the deputy president.
In fact,
maybe these things have been done in secret or something.
Right.
I wanted to waste Linus's more oxygen. This time, that was a verbal directive by the president. I want to share with you a written directive on June 14th, 2018. That day, I want to read it. The president said that effective the 1st of July 2018, all public procuring entities shall maintain and continuously update and publicize through the websites of the public procuring entity, e-citizen, public procurement regulatory authority platforms, public notice boards, and official government publications, complete information of all tenders awarded, including but not limited to 1, full particulars of the awarded bidder, 2, specification of goods and services, scope and schedule of works and contract value, 3, technical and financial capacity of the awarded bidder, 4, award date and contract period, 5, current market price of the specific goods, 6, variations in regard to specification of goods, and 7, the names of the members of evaluation committee and inspection, so on and so forth. I invite you to waste a little more oxygen, visit the websites and see how many of the tenders you will find there. You are likely to find very few.
Yeah, this was nothing new. And I just wanted to add on to that, because that was 2 years ago, right? And then there was, you know, a back and forth again over that very issue, right? About who manages this thing. And, you know, it has been said that many ministries and state departments have continued to ignore that directive over 2 years where nothing has been done. Apparently that website where all of these tenders were to be published was to be managed by the PPRA, that's the Public Procurement Regulation Authority, and Treasury. Right? Now, when they were asked about it, said the procuring entities are not submitting information to them. When the Ministry of ICT was asked, they said, no, their work was to provide the platform. PPRA and Treasury was to manage that. To date, nothing. The ministries, on the other hand, when they were asked about why they've not been publishing, you know, these tenders there, said that they were initially hampered by the president's order, if you remember, where he asked all heads of procurement to step aside pending vetting. 1,000 of them. 1,000 of them. The results of which were never publicly made, if I'm not wrong.
Actually,
we heard that they cleared about 400
they cleared them.
And then we don't
and
know
remember, at that time, they even said they were going to use lie detectors and that sort of thing. So where is it? In fact, I dare say, where is that lifestyle audit of the president himself and his deputy? We've never been given the results of those where it says...
It never happened.
As an individual, I did the lifestyle audit, this is what I... You know, like just sort of setting the example and leading from the front. So this is something 2 years in the making, and then now we hear it as if it is something new.
Let me just further illustrate how false and fake this whole government response to KEMSA is. We remember there was a supposed reshuffle in the Ministry of Health.
That was recalled almost
That was retracted. It has never happened in the history, to the best of my recollection, that presidential communication can be handled that way. That you've appointed and then retracted. It has never, ever happened. Because what were you saying? When you are making those changes, it meant you identified the problem and you are going to move into the ministry to fix that problem by probably changing the occupants of the office. Mm-hmm. But what is that within a few minutes that then causes you to retract the statement? I pity us as Kenyans on this whole issue of KEMSA and on this whole question of corruption, because we will not get the answers. What instead will happen is all this will be a burden for future governments to resolve.
And you know, this is so strange because, and sad, because it's happening in the Ministry of Health. I mean, all these years we've been talking about the Ministry of Health not getting the right budgetary allocation. Their budget declaration that they talk about 2001, this is 19 years later, where they were talking about allocating 15% of the GDP. Ours has been hovering around 4%, 5%, 6%, and yet that's the ministry that appears to be the most lucrative in terms of as far as corruption goes. Isn't that so sad, Jamil?
It is very sad.
That in this country,
yes,
trouble actually creates millionaires.
It is true, trouble creates millionaires. And you speak about the Ministry of Health and the fact that it is one of the biggest ministries that is being mentioned and being involved in the loss of all this money. And then you look at the repercussions or the ripple effect of all this, just right down to the Mwananchi. Look at the fact that as a government, we keep talking about corruption and we're fighting it and we're not. It seems like we're playing to the gallery when these announcements are made. Look at the agenda, the government's agenda, the president's agenda. Universal health coverage is a big flop. Yeah, it's a big flop. Yes, it had been tested in those 4 counties of Nyeri and Isiolo and Machakos and Kisumu, but as it stands, it's a flop. It's not working. We have, we're talking about how PPEs are in warehouses, in KEMSA warehouses, and when you hear about healthcare workers who are striking because they don't have those PPEs that they need, you hear some of them have to recycle masks because they don't have them. And when they talk about how they're unable to continue their work because they endanger themselves, we call them our frontline soldiers for the fight against COVID-19 because hawana vitu wanahitaji, it makes you ask ourselves, what are our priorities? Why are people benefiting from something as important, as vital as the health of this country? COVID-19 is a pandemic. We have 585 people who have died from it in Kenya as of today. And of course now we are seeing, pengine tumeanza kupata ile 5% or 7% infection rate per day that according to WHO, if you have that consistently for 2 weeks, then it means you're flattening the curve. That's well and good, but as we stand now, COVID-19 is still here and we still need to be careful. We keep hearing over any masks, PPEs and all that, but as a country, our priorities are wrong. We are stealing when we shouldn't be. Our leaders seem not to care.
And now it is all about politics.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at what's going on, and you would actually think there is an election, and KEMSA is actually the one that we are fighting, a country called KEMSA.
You see, Joe, let me tell you how sick the situation is at Afya House. Number one, last week I spoke to Kiraitu Murungi during Katiba 10, the governor of Meru. You see, health is a devolved function, fully devolved function, except for the national referral hospitals. Yet, governors are complaining that up to 80% of the resources allocated to the Ministry of Health remain at Afya House. And counties cannot procure medical supplies on themselves, by themselves. They have to rely on KEMSA. Why? Because the law was changed that the national government and the county governments must only get supplies from KEMSA, except when such supplies cannot be found or KEMSA is unable to supply. And so, counties, much as they would want to make other deals elsewhere and maybe get the same supplies at a cheaper rate, they have to rely on KEMSA 100%. And if 80% of the resources are remaining at Afya House, and even the little that goes to counties is still being controlled by KEMSA, a national government entity, tells you why there has been this hulabaloo about health as a devolved function, and they often clamor for the health function to revert to the national government.
From what we are seeing, Francis, I think remaining at Afya House is becoming almost a misnomer.
Right.
It doesn't quite
remain there.
So basically, it's a very difficult situation that we are talking about here. And counties will continue to get the stick from citizens,
The short end of
because
it,
yeah.
ordinary citizens know health is a devolved function. So they'll ask their governors, why don't we have medicine in hospitals? Why don't we have medical personnel in hospitals? Yet the function is devolved, but the resources are not actually being devolved per se.
Yeah, we need to take a break.
Yeah,
but
I wanted to add
the politics,
something about the politics, and also just the fact that because we're now reviewing a lot of what's been happening throughout the term of this administration, where procurement has been the gravy train for corruption in this, not just with this scandal, but with all of the others, Aror, Kimwarer, and all of the others that have come up, and even in that, that's where you would think there would be tightening and regulation. Now, I'm not about to cast aspersions here, but perception matters. So if you take a look at, for example, the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, PPRA, that is supposed to govern the issues of procurement, is headed by the same person who is also the chair of the National Elections Board of Jubilee Party. Now, blurred lines. Now, it may be all well-meaning and people might be able to draw the lines, but it still does create a certain perception. I mean, take a look at a mega businessman today who also heads the Chamber of Commerce, who is also doing big deals with the government. Again, all of these things will be decided by a court of law, but this administration really needs to be clear about also the perception that it sends about being able to set lines and set boundaries, because all of these blurred lines, just create a little more suspicion, even where there might be none.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the framework, Yvonne. That is how it's supposed to be. That is how it was shaped in 2013. Let's all remember the tone of the campaigns of 2012, 2013. And even the entrance into government and the habits that went into formation of this administration, where we started seeing consultants replacing proper public service personnel. You'd have a cabinet secretary working in with a lot of what do you call them? Consultants. There's a consultant for youth. There's a consultant for this and that, ignoring the structures of the government as set by the public service itself. Because the idea was, once you are in office, make money. It is trade, it's business. Which is why on the 8th year, again, I persuade you, we are wasting time thinking anything different will be done about KEMSA that could not be done about Eurobond, that could not be done about SGR, which grew from 220 billion shillings to 334 billion shillings for a railway line that is shorter than Ethiopia's that has been done at a much lower price. Okay. So we are talking about a culture here, Joe, which is why I wouldn't agree with Francis on the plight of the counties. What you see governors doing, they are simply whining that it's not happening on their tables.
We need to take a break.
Because looking at the cases that we've discussed here, we've seen them misappropriate per diem, travel money.
Yeah. So it is formal.
You imagine
missing
what
out.
5 billion can do.
Yes, 5 billion.
I mean, KEMSA, those are 47 other scandals.
So we are taking a break. There is a gentleman here. His name is Dr. Vincent Ongora. He always watches this show. He says, corruption in Kenya is not a disease, but a symptom of a malignant disease called dearth of responsible leadership. The COVID-19 malfeasance has been deliberately presented in a convoluted manner so that nobody understands it. It was a scheme ab initio to siphon public resources to line pockets of a few public servants and their cronies. Are you surprised that in the last 7 years, Kenya has created about 40 billionaires, most of them beneficiaries of tenderpreneurship and crony capitalism? Wow, okay.
Wow.
A lot of English there, but very...
Yeah.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the politics of all of this. We've seen a shouting match going on around this KEMSA issue, looking like it's the new flashpoint in some of these battles that have been going on for a while. But we discuss that when we come back.